Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. The financial emergency is over for Benton Harbor. Tonight, a look at the success of emergency management in Michigan and if it's still a solution. Plus, as we wait for a court ruling, is the ban on gay marriage in Michigan potentially hurting the state's economic recovery? Also coming up tonight, Kevin Orr is getting creative with a plan B for the Detroit Water and Sewer Department. General Motors in crisis PR mode with a major recall. Legislators make a deal to fix our lousy roads, thank goodness. And weird ordinance ban of the week, what you can now legally do in Grand Rapids. All that is coming up for you tonight. But first, after 4 years, Benton Harbor is out of emergency management as of this week. The city has a budget surplus, made contributions to its pension fund. And as we come up on Detroit's anniversary with an EM, does Benton Harbor's success show that emergency managers are truly the solution for struggling cities? Let's start there tonight with our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Hi, guys. How are you?
Good.
So it's been kind of a busy week, and good news for Benton Harbor coming out of emergency management. Just 4 years. So is this the success story we've been waiting to see on the EM front, Nolan?
Well, 4 years is a long time, and the new emergency manager law, which went into effect after Benton Harbor went in, only allows for 18 months of the initial emergency manager. So it's a long time. That was a major problem out there. Whether or not this solves their problems long term, who knows? But they managed to get through. They're financially much more rational, much better safe, and it is a good model for Detroit. Hopefully Detroit's won't take as long, but they did a lot of very hard things out there in terms of selling city-owned properties, outsourcing, privatizing services. They should be set up for the long term if they get better local decision makers.
All right, so that's basically the main point, though. Once you've set them up for success in the long term, you've got to have the political will to make those tough decisions to keep the city on track. Do you think that municipalities have that political will, Steve?
Well, history says no, right?
Yes.
Flint has been in and out twice, I believe, of emergency management. Probably, I understand, is headed for a bankruptcy later this year. Hamtramck has been in and out a couple times. Highland Park. This is a model. Detroit schools. It's a model that only takes you halfway, and that's the problem. It doesn't address the revenue side of things, and that's where cities are still struggling. You can go in and restructure debt. You can go in and stop wasteful practices. You can go in and outsource services, but you cannot raise revenues very easily in these cities. And so many municipalities are still really struggling with the loss of revenue sharing from the state, which is down significantly over the last decade, and the lack of recovery in the tax base to match the real estate rebound. I mean, because we have Prop A and the Headley Amendment, their tax bases don't recover at the same rate. And so you've got this big problem that's not really being addressed at the state level, and emergency management is not set up to deal with it. And that's why you see people going in and out of these.
Well, you see a somewhat different approach in Detroit. You see an awareness of that, I think, Steve,
Sure.
in that they are very aware of the fact that simply wiping away their debts and changing the operating structure, outsourcing a few services is not going to fix the long-term problem of too few people, too few taxpayers
Sure.
in the city. And that's why I think you see a concentration on making Detroit livable again. And a big part of the discussion during this bankruptcy emergency manager process is not just fixing this finances, it's making Detroit a more livable place,
Right.
improving services, making it
Well,
safer.
and you've got to, sure.
And that is essential. It's essential to all these. If you continue to be a place people want to leave instead of come to, you're never going to be a viable city. And I do think that both Orr and Mike Duggan understand that.
I think they do.
And the governor.
But I also, look in Kevin Orr's plan of adjustment. Look at the revenue projections out over the next 10 years, up till 2023. Income tax goes down. Property tax goes down. Utility tax goes down.
There's no reason any of those should go down from the point today if they start collecting what they're owed. They're only collecting half what they're owed.
But that's a huge problem in being.
It's not one that's unfixable.
But even collecting what they're owed, those are projections based on what they would be able to collect over that time, you're seeing declines. And the only thing, as you point out, that'll fix that is having more people move into the city and pay taxes. That's a huge part of this. That's not a guarantee. Mike Duggan says he wants to grow the city's population starting in year 4 of his administration. That has not happened since 1950. I think it's great to set that as a goal. I'm not sure how realistic.
Well, you stabilize it first, but let me ask you this. Let's step back and take a look at the big picture of emergency management. Do we say that this is a successful model, that this is what Michigan should be doing for its cities? Is Benton Harbor, do we hold that up as the one success story, or how many success stories do you think that we're going to see?
I think the jury's still out. We don't know what's going to happen with Pontiac, which came out several months ago from emergency manager. All these places will still have, including Detroit, will still have a financial advisory board to oversee
Transition
their
them out
operations for a few years. I don't know if it's the best solution. It's the only solution anybody's come up with. The answer simply is not simply throwing a whole lot more money into badly managed cities. We've tried that. That money just disappears. I think you have to have some element of restructuring and hopefully a culture change in terms of the operations of these cities. We haven't seen yet the culture change that emergency manager was supposed to deliver.
And the culture change is a lot harder than wiping out the
I actually
debt.
disagree with that in Flint. I mean, Flint's a good example of where that culture change did take place, and you had a very good mayor in place. You had a competent council. There's just not enough money to operate these cities the way that they're set up, and at some point we have to face the real question of whether we want to pay for the government that we have in this state, or if we want to do something else.
You can't continue to pay to operate cities that are designed for 2 and 3 times the population they have. That's not fair to communities elsewhere. So the expectation of Detroit and Flint and other places is to reposition that footprint so you have a manageable city. I mean, you can't pay to operate a city for 2 million people that only has 680.
Right. Well, but the footprint is the problem in Detroit, and you can't just, in Michigan, you can't just like lop off parts of a community. I mean,
and consolidation has been a pretty dirty word.
Consolidation is not something people want to do. Oakland County doesn't want to take responsibility for Detroit. Wayne County doesn't want to take responsibility for Detroit.
But the Detroit Future City Plan, in terms of shrinking it to a manageable footprint, it's long term, but it's got to start sometime.
Sure.
And I think that's the only answer. You have to reshape these communities to make them viable for the size they are, not the size they were.
Or we could decide that, we're going to fund cities the way that we used to.
So what do you defund, Steve?
Well, the taxes are growing. The tax base is growing in the state. The state is showing surpluses every year while it's starving cities of the money that they used to get.
You see a lot of this year's surplus coming back.
Some of it coming to cities, sure.
And to school districts. So.
All right. Well.